It was a phone call that made headlines around the world. Vladimir Putin, the man who launched the bloodiest land war in Europe since World War II, called Donald Trump. And according to the Kremlin, he made an offer. A ceasefire, starting May 9th. The world held its breath. Could this be it? After 4 brutal years of war, after over 1 million Russian casualties, after thousands of Ukrainian cities bombed, burned, and buried under rubble, after children killed in their beds, students killed in their dormitories, grandmothers killed waiting for a bus, could it actually be over? Well, before you pop the champagne, let me tell you what was actually happening on the same day Putin made that offer. Russia was launching 9,870 kamikaze drones at Ukrainian cities. 9,870. So today, we're going to do something the political pundits and the TV talking heads often forget to do. We're going to put Putin's ceasefire offer under a microscope. We're going to look at what he actually said, what he actually did, what the history tells us, and what Zelensky, and frankly anyone with eyes and a memory, thinks about it. Because the difference between a peace offer and a trap is something the entire world needs to understand right now. This is the full story. Let's start with what we actually know. In late April 2026, Vladimir Putin called Donald Trump. During that call, according to the Kremlin, Putin proposed a ceasefire to coincide with May 9th, Russia's Victory Day, the annual celebration of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. May 9th is the biggest holiday in Russia's political calendar. It's the day Putin stands on Red Square in Moscow, military generals march in formation, tanks roll through the streets, and the Kremlin's narrative of Russian greatness and military power is performed for the entire world. Putin's proposal, as relayed through his aide Yuri Ushakov, was for a ceasefire during the May 9th holiday. That sounds like peace, right? Except almost immediately the details, or rather the complete lack of details, began to unravel the story. The Kremlin's own spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, was asked to clarify. What are the terms? How long would the ceasefire last? Would it cover all fronts? Would there be verification mechanisms? Would international observers be present? Peskov's answer was stunning in its vagueness. For now, no concrete decision has been made, he said. It would be for Putin to decide on the specific terms. Read that again. The man announcing a ceasefire said that no concrete decision had been made and that the terms would be decided by the same man who proposed it at an unspecified future time. That is not a peace proposal. That's a press release. Zelensky's response was immediate and characteristically direct. He instructed Ukrainian officials to contact Trump's team to clarify the details. And in a post on Telegram, he publicly asked the question that everyone was thinking. We will find out exactly what is being discussed, whether it's a few hours of security for a parade in Moscow or something more. There it is, in plain language. Zelensky wasn't being dismissive or ungrateful. He was applying the most basic standard of rational thinking. If you want a ceasefire, you have to tell us what it actually means. And so far, Russia hadn't done that. Now here's where I need you to pay close attention, because what I'm about to share with you is not opinion. It's documented history, and it is absolutely essential context for understanding why Zelensky, and most of Europe, greeted Putin's ceasefire offer with deep, well-earned suspicion. Let's go back to March 2025. After months of American diplomatic pressure, Ukraine agreed to a 30-day ceasefire proposal. This wasn't a small thing. This was Ukraine, the country being invaded, agreeing to stop fighting with the backing of the United States and European allies. The ball was in Russia's court. Russia's response? Kremlin Senator Konstantin Kosachev said, publicly and on record, Russia is advancing on the battlefield, so it will be different with Russia. Any agreements should be on our terms, not American. Not interested. Then came March 18, 2025. After a direct phone conversation between Trump and Putin, Russia agreed to a partial ceasefire, specifically agreeing to stop attacking Ukrainian energy infrastructure for 1 month. This was framed as a breakthrough, a sign that diplomacy was working. Here's what actually happened. Ukraine's officials said that Russian forces struck civilian infrastructure almost every single night after March 18th. They documented 8 strikes against energy infrastructure, without detailing every attack. Both sides accused each other of breaches, but the pattern was clear. Russia announced a ceasefire and kept attacking. Fast forward to the spring of 2026, Ukraine and Russia actually met face-to-face for direct talks, for the first time in years. The location was chosen, delegations were assembled, the world watched. The talks ended after less than 2 hours. 2 hours, without a ceasefire. The one concrete outcome from those talks was an agreement to exchange 1,000 prisoners of war each. That's meaningful for the individuals involved, genuinely meaningful. But it is not a ceasefire. It is not peace. It is a single humanitarian step while the bombs keep falling. And then there's the broader pattern of Russian diplomacy throughout this entire war. Russia violated the Budapest Memorandum, the 1994 agreement in which Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom promised Ukraine that its territorial integrity would be protected in exchange for giving up its Soviet-era nuclear weapons. Ukraine gave up the 3rd largest nuclear arsenal in the world based on that promise. Russia also violated its own 2009 reaffirmation of those security assurances. Russia violated the Minsk agreements, the 2014 and 2015 ceasefire deals that were supposed to resolve the conflict in eastern Ukraine. And now we're supposed to believe that a vague, unspecified ceasefire offer for a parade is Russia finally coming to the table in good faith? If you're detecting some skepticism here, it's not cynicism. It's pattern recognition. You cannot tell this story without talking about Donald Trump. And I want to be fair here because the situation is genuinely complex. Trump came into office in January 2025 with a bold promise. He would end the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours. That didn't happen. But he has made ending the war a central pillar of his foreign policy, and he's invested enormous political capital in the effort. The question is, what kind of peace? The Trump administration has pushed Ukraine hard to make concessions. According to detailed reporting from Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Zelensky, under intense American pressure, agreed to Trump's initial proposal for an unconditional ceasefire. He said he was open to Ukraine abandoning its bid for NATO membership. He said Ukraine could accept certain limits on the size of its military. He even entertained the idea of Ukrainian troops withdrawing from the remaining parts of the Donetsk region under Kiev's control, an area roughly the size of Delaware, if it became a demilitarized zone. That is an enormous list of concessions from the country that was invaded, from the country whose cities are being bombed every night, from the country whose students are being killed in their dormitories. And Putin's response to all of this flexibility? To keep advancing, to launch more drones, to reject ceasefire after ceasefire, to send a low-level delegation to direct talks, what Zelensky described as representatives who weren't empowered to actually make decisions. Trump has grown frustrated, and he's not hiding it. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt publicly stated that Trump has grown weary and frustrated with both sides of the conflict. Vice President J.D. Vance went further, saying Trump is more than open to walking away from trying to broker peace. It takes 2 to tango, Vance said. If Russia is not willing to do that, then we're eventually just going to have to say, this is not our war. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent added that if Putin doesn't negotiate in good faith, additional sanctions against Russia were on the table. And then there's Europe. Poland's prime minister has publicly condemned what he sees as NATO disintegration, triggered by Trump's announcement that the U.S. would reduce troop presence in Europe, not just by 5,000, but, quote, way down, cutting a lot further than 5,000. The architecture of European security that has kept the continent largely at peace since 1945 is being renegotiated in real time. And Vladimir Putin, who has studied Western politics his entire career, is watching every crack appear. Because here's the fundamental strategic reality that explains everything about Putin's behavior. Putin doesn't need to win on the battlefield. He just needs to wait. He needs to wait for Western resolve to crack. He needs to wait for Ukraine to run out of ammunition, money, and manpower. He needs to wait for the next election cycle, the next financial crisis, the next distraction. And every fake ceasefire offer, every vague proposal, every theatrical gesture of diplomacy is designed to buy time while Russia keeps advancing on the ground. That's not speculation. That's what the Kremlin senator literally said out loud. Russia is advancing, so any agreement will be on Russian terms. I want to take a moment to really listen to what Zelensky is saying, because he's often caricatured, either as a heroic symbol or as an obstacle to peace, depending on who's doing the talking. Zelensky is not opposed to peace. He has made painful concessions under enormous pressure from his most important ally. He has traveled to conflict zones, addressed parliaments around the world, and put himself personally at risk to maintain global support for Ukraine. But here is his core position, stated clearly in multiple forums. A short-term pause is not peace. A 3-day parade ceasefire that lets Russia regroup, rearm, and then restart the bombing. That is not peace. That is a trap. We will find out exactly what is being discussed, he said after Putin's proposal, whether it's a few hours of security for a parade in Moscow or something more. Ukraine's counter-proposal is a genuine, lasting ceasefire, one with real terms, real duration, real verification, real security guarantees, not just promises from a country that has broken every promise it has ever made. And Zelensky has a specific fear that is absolutely grounded in reality. If there's a ceasefire, even a temporary one, and Western military aid slows down or stops because the headlines change, Russia will use that window to rebuild its forces. And then, when the ceasefire collapses, as every previous Russian ceasefire has collapsed, Ukraine will face an even stronger military, with fewer Western weapons, less international attention, and a more fractured alliance. This is not paranoia. This is exactly what happened after the 2014 and 2015 Minsk agreements. Russia used the relative calm to build up its military presence in eastern Ukraine, consolidate control over Crimea, and prepare for the full-scale invasion it launched in 2022. Fool me once, shame on you. Zelensky is not going to be fooled twice, and frankly, given the history, it's hard to argue he's wrong. While Russia plays its diplomatic games and America signals strategic ambiguity, Europe has been quietly, steadily stepping up. Zelensky met with Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babiš in Yerevan, discussing bilateral relations and continued support. The Czech Republic has been one of Ukraine's most consistent supporters, coordinating a major ammunition procurement initiative on Ukraine's behalf. The so-called Coalition of the Willing, a group of European nations willing to provide security guarantees for Ukraine and potentially deploy peacekeeping forces, has been taking shape, though details remain closely guarded for obvious diplomatic reasons. France and the UK have been particularly vocal about maintaining pressure on Russia. Both nations have signaled willingness to back Ukrainian positions, even as American commitment wavers. And Slovakia's Prime Minister, who has been one of the more Russia-friendly voices in Central Europe, was invited by Zelensky to visit Kyiv ahead of a planned trip to Moscow. The invitation is a diplomatic move of considerable sophistication. Demonstrate to the world that Ukraine is the side that wants dialogue and engagement, not Russia. There's also the question of Belarus, and this is a dark cloud on the horizon that Europe is watching with deep concern. Zelensky has reported unusual military activity along Ukraine's border with Belarus. He didn't provide specific details, for obvious intelligence reasons, but the implication is alarming. Russia has used Belarusian territory before. That's how they launched their initial assault on Kyiv back in February 2022. If Russia is preparing a new northern offensive through Belarus, it would completely change the strategic map of this war. Ukraine would be fighting on an entirely new front, potentially exposing Kyiv again for the first time in over 4 years. Europe is watching. NATO is watching. And every diplomatic maneuver, including the May 9th ceasefire proposal, has to be understood in the context of this potential military buildup. So, is Putin's May 9th ceasefire offer a genuine step toward peace? Let's look at the evidence. On the same week that Russia proposed a ceasefire, Russia launched 9,870 kamikaze drones at Ukrainian cities. Russian missiles hit a university dormitory in Dnipro, killing a student. Russian drones blew up a civilian bus in Kherson, killing 2 people. Russian forces killed 1 person and injured 18 others in the Sumy region in a single day. Russia sent a low-level delegation, people without decision-making authority, to the one direct talk session that has taken place. Russia's own spokesperson admitted that no concrete decision had been made on the terms of the proposed ceasefire. Russia has violated every single previous ceasefire agreement it has ever signed with Ukraine. Based on this evidence, there are really only 2 possible explanations for Putin's ceasefire offer. The first possibility: Putin genuinely wants a temporary pause, not to end the war, but to rest his forces, resupply his ammunition, manage international optics around May 9th, and buy political space while the West debates whether to stay engaged. This would be consistent with every previous Russian ceasefire proposal. The second possibility: Putin made this proposal knowing Ukraine would reject the vague, unverifiable terms, and the goal is to make Ukraine look like the obstacle to peace, to shift the narrative, to give Trump and the American public and war-weary European populations a reason to pull back. We tried, they refused. Neither of these possibilities involves genuine peace. Zelensky's response, "Tell us the real terms," is the correct one. Peace negotiations are not press releases. A ceasefire is not a phone call. Real agreements require real terms, real timelines, real verification, and real consequences for violations. Until Russia is willing to sit down and negotiate those details, under international supervision, with verifiable commitments, every ceasefire proposal from the Kremlin should be treated as what the historical evidence suggests it is: a tactical maneuver, not a peace offering. I want to close this video by stepping back even further and asking a question that extends well beyond Ukraine. What precedent does this war set for the rest of the world? If Russia successfully uses military force to take territory from a sovereign nation, if the international community accepts a peace deal that rewards that aggression with territorial gains, what does that tell every other authoritarian government on Earth? It tells them that aggression works, that if you're willing to be brutal enough, relentless enough, and patient enough, eventually the world will get tired and give you what you want. Taiwan is watching. China is watching. Iran is watching. North Korea, which has been supplying ammunition to Russia, is watching and learning. This is why Ukraine matters. Not just to Ukrainians, not just to Europeans. To every country that has ever been small and faced a larger, more powerful neighbor with territorial ambitions. The rules-based international order, the system of norms and agreements that have governed global relations since 1945, is on trial in Ukraine. And the verdict isn't just about Ukraine's borders. It's about whether size and military force or law and sovereignty determine who gets to exist as a free nation. And right now, a vague 3-day ceasefire offer made with no terms, no verification, and no good faith, while Russian missiles keep falling on Ukrainian cities, is asking the world to pretend that question has been answered. It hasn't. Putin's May 9th ceasefire proposal. Is it peace, or is it a parade trick? Based on the history, based on the evidence, based on what's happening on the ground right now, you already know the answer. But here's what I'll leave you with. The people of Ukraine haven't given up. They're fighting, on the battlefield, in the diplomatic halls, in the court of global public opinion, every single day. And they deserve an honest world. A world that calls things what they are. A world that doesn't accept vague press releases as peace. You can be part of that world. Share this video, talk about it. Don't let the story disappear under the next news cycle. If this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening, hit that like button. It genuinely matters for reaching more people. Subscribe if you want us to keep doing this. Honest, detailed, no-spin analysis of the most important story happening in the world right now. We'll see you in the next one.